Dr. Maggie Gaddis is a restoration ecologist and botany educator. She is the first executive director of the Colorado Native Plant Society, a statewide nonprofit dedicated to conserving Colorado native plants and habitats. And prior to assuming this role, Maggie taught biology and sustainability courses at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Maggie, if you don't know, she works closely with Alex Crochet, the Colorado Springs city horticulturist, to advance her revegetation research, and they make a great partnership and duo. They engage students and community scientists in their work. So one thing I will say is that having Maggie in our Colorado Springs community is just a huge asset. We're so grateful to have her be in our city. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Maggie. And let me know if you need anything as we go along.
Okay, well, thank you, Catherine. And I will just say that we are so lucky to have you and Lisa at Colorado Springs Utilities, because although people think Colorado Springs is far away from where all the people are in Colorado, we are really just leading the curve on our native plant revolution in Colorado. So it's been an awesome partnership. And it was just lucky that Alex and I got our jobs at the same time. And let me also just say, if you can't hear me well, I will turn my camera off. So just interrupt me if that happens. So before we go past this first slide, as Catherine mentioned, I've worked a lot with Alex, but before I did that, I just moved here. My husband's from Colorado Springs, and we moved here from Chaffee County to be closer to our grandparents, and I was getting my PhD, and I worked with Rocky Mountain Field Institute because I wrote my PhD about how do you train community scientists to collect reliable data. And I wanted to just be running a community science program while I was studying it. And so we ran the Rocky Mountain Field Institute Citizen Science Program. And I can't see everyone who is here on the call. I could only see names A through D. So hello, Alex Smith. Hello, Dale Brown. Hello, Christian. Maybe Larry Bogue is here, or Sue Campbell. They were some of our first community scientists. So thank you for that. And Sue now runs the Colorado Climate Lobby in our chapter here in Pikes Peak region, if you're interested about that. But we're looking at this picture because we would go out to the Garden of the Gods. This is in the Garden of the Gods, the Southern Reservoir. And I worked for Roomfee, and we would close trails, right? So there's used to be a trail right through this valley, and it's redundant with the trail on Niobrara Ridge and then the Ute Trail going around the other side. And so we were closing it because this is a really important area for wildlife in the Garden of the Gods. And so there used to be a trail that ran right down the middle of this, but we like with volunteers, we like scarified the surface of the trail, and then we spread native grass seed. And I had moved here from the mountains. I was really like, that's not going to work, but it did. And we found after 5 years that we had like achieved the referent plant cover, our work was done. But it is really quite amazing living in the grasslands. These plants are really adapted to this dry climate, and restoring your seed bank is an important conclusion here. And I did give a talk that goes right along here. The cool thing about the Garden of the Gods is there is an agricultural heritage, right? The homestead, Rock Ledge Ranch. And you can see in the Northern Reservoir Valley that they had their cattle there, and it's all smooth brome and like ancient cottonwood trees. There used to be like a pond there. And then you go over this little divide as you travel south, and you get into this valley. And this valley is the best remnant prairie. It is just a collection of native plants, and it's really a beautiful place to learn about grasses. And all the pictures that you see here were taken probably right here in this valley. So I will move to the next slide. The cover of Ackerfield, the center book looks different now. They have to update the slide. But there are some really good tools for your grass learning. Now, a lot of people, us old timers, we learned with the Weber and Whitman book and the book on the left, Colorado Flora. This is a morphological key, right? So you could definitely use this to help you learn your plants. But we're in the age of genetics, right? So in the middle title, our Flora of Colorado, there's a lot of name changes and relationship changes between plants that are driven by genetic research, looking at like the phylogeny of the plants. And then over on the right, Jan Wingate is an author from Denver Botanic Gardens. She really is the grass expert of Colorado. This is just a really simple little guide I have a picture of, but she has a sedge book and a wonderful grass book that just came out, and also one that she published last year. It's Vegetative Keys of Grasses. So looking at things that are not the florets when you are looking at grasses any time of the year that they're not flowering. So that was really exciting when that book came out. So as we move on, grasses, they're flowering plants, right? They're in the angiospermae. They have seeds. They do all the stuff that, quote, flowers do. But we use different words to describe their body parts. And this is what I'm going to teach you today, is to look at these things, right? We're not like taking a picture of a beautiful bloom. We're looking deeply into the grass anatomy. So also an important thing about grasses is, and you guys know this if you're doing your turf conversion, that grasses have fibrous roots, right? And they can move along with rhizomes underground or stolons overground. But what I want you to see in the right side here is the great carbon storage that is grass, right? I was in a talk just last week, and there's this lovely slide I got to get hold of different size circles, right? And the question is, what's the largest carbon sink in the world? It's the grasslands. So just by having native grasses in your landscape, you are contributing to our climate resilience, and you're helping more carbon to be underground than in the atmosphere. And that has mitigating effects for climate change. So let's look here. As we move on, right, we want to think about how there are three basic forms in a grass, and it relates to these little stems that go from the main stem to the flowers. And so the first is a spike, and spikes are sessile. And the word sessile could be also applied to any flowers. And it just basically means that the flowers are rising from the central stem. It doesn't have this other little pedicel. And then when we have a raceme, right, you have a spikelet that every seed is born on a little pedicel. And the main stem is called the rachis. And then on the right, we see a panicle. And this is a seed head where those stems leading to the flowers are numerous and compound. So there's one stem leading to another stem. And so we'll think a lot about how we can sort of, in our mind, categorize different grasses as being in one of these three categories. All right. So here we are at our first plant. So we're just going to walk through the plants, and these are the ones that are common, grasses common to Pikes Peak region. What I want you to think about when you're looking at the slides are the pictures that I took, right? So if you want to identify grasses, you have to be looking at their body parts and taking great pictures. I turned off my Zoom window so I can't see your responses, but you could make a reaction if you use iNaturalist. I highly recommend it. That is a great way to learn any of your species. And we can talk about that more later. So here is the sand rice grass. This is a lovely grass that has an open panicle, right? You can see that same picture in the bottom right. And what we see in this picture in the middle with my fingers is the ligule, right? I didn't focus too much on that diagram. I'll talk through the vocabulary as we look at the pictures. And can you see my cursor? Can you tell me that, Catherine?
Yeah, we can see your cursor, Maggie. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So when we look at the rice grass, we see that it has like a membranous ligule, this little thing that is between the sheath and the stem, and this whole thing is called a culm. There's something going on right there, right where the leaf departs from the main stem. And here we can see that it's membranous. And then over in the left picture, right, this is what I think is the coolest thing about this plant. And also sand drop seed does the same thing. All of this stuff in the open panicle is already developed when it emerges from the sheath. And so you can see there that these seeds, right, they're not baby seeds, they're already developed. They're just all like nicely folded up inside of that sheath. And then it opens to the panicle. So if you saw it before it was open, right, but it was all emerging from this rolling sheath, that is one great way to recognize sand ricegrass. And then if you get to see the seeds, that's a real treat. They are black and round, and then they have all these white hairs on them. And so it's just no other seed looks like that. And so that's a dead giveaway. And this was an important food source for indigenous peoples in the landscape. All right, so now we'll go to Big Blue Stem, and I'll probably say, oh, that's my favorite grass like a couple of times. But basically, this is such a fun one. It is bigger than me, and I'm 5.5 feet tall. And it just has this lovely expression. We like to call it turkey foot, because you see these spikelets emerge, and there's more than one. There's actually like four, and it looks like there's three. People always hold up their fingers. But what also I want to note for you here, we're seeing a different part of the grass that we didn't see before. And this right here, these yellow things, I just learned this, I swear to God, last week. I was giving a lecture in my class, and I always just talked about these as being petals, but they're actually the anthers, and they are like always hanging down, and they're hanging on the filament, and these are parts of the male reproductive organs of the plant, and that is whole thing is called the stamen, so it has the word men right in it. And so we see here, it's never referenced in a key, but grasses have these cool things hanging out of them of different colors. And so the ones in the Big Blue Stem are yellow, and those are the male reproductive parts. Now, in this picture, I'd have to like, oh, maybe I can do it because I'm looking at my PDF. So now if we get closer, this doesn't look super awesome, but here you see these little purple pipe cleaners sticking out of the inflorescence, and those are the female reproductive parts. That's the stigma. So on a good day, in the morning light, this thing is so cool because it's purple and yellow. It has a lot of great color. Okay, now let's look over to the right. So here we're looking at just the sheath, right? And we're seeing another thing that happens right there at the ligule. This whole thing is called the collar, and I really think of it as being like the collar of the shirt. And sometimes there is a color differentiation, right? So here we can see that right there, it pinches in and it is kind of whitish, right? And then the top of the sheath sticks out. And some grasses that doesn't happen. It's more of like a tapered edge. And then we can also see that there's some hairs there. And so looking at those hairs is important, and that is referenced in the key. All right, so let's go to purple 3 on. And all right, so this is demonstrating another great photographic tool when you're looking at grasses. Like if you take your photograph in uh, with a white background or some sort of paper behind it, sometimes looking at the shadow is like easier to ascertain what's going on than just actually looking at the plant. And so I love to take these shadow pictures. And what we are seeing here is another part of the grass. So when we think about the floret structure, there's sometimes these things sticking out of them, right? And they're called awns. And in this purple 3-on, aptly named, all these long hair things, if you look straight down onto it, there are 3 coming out of a single floret. And so that is why it's called purple 3-on. And there's no other grass that has such long awns, and especially no other grass that has awns in this geometry of 3 per. All right. Now let's go to Side Oats Grandma. And here we see this photo of the raceme, right? See how it's like easier to see in the shadow than in the actual photo. That each of the florets is borne on a little pedestal. And this might not be important if you're just walking around your landscape knowing the names of it, but that is definitely a character that splits the grasses in the key. Do they have that little footstalk or not? Um, and here in this middle grass, we're also seeing another thing that is good to note, right? What is the geometry of that sheath coming away from the stem? And so here it goes on a little angle. And also the grass comes to a very acute tip, which you can see in these 2 pictures as well. And so that would be another great character. And also, while we're here, I'll just say another thing in the key is like whether, you know, these pedestals lead to 1 or more florets, right? So this is a good example of it leading to just 1. All right. So now we're looking at Bootaloo grasslist, Blue Grandma, and this is our Colorado State grass, and it is affectionately called the eyelash grass. And there are lots of different eyelashes. There's Black Grandma and Hairy Grandma and Blue Grandma, but they all have this central form. And so now when we talk about the rachis, like that central stem, it's this back rib of the floret on the Blue Grandma. And how you actually identify the different grandmas, like, has a lot to do with how that looks. In the hairy, in the Black grandma, the rachis like sticks out farther than the little florets. And then also here we see, right, the anthers sticking out again and hanging on these little anthers, or on these little filaments. And in the Blue Grandma, they're usually light in color. And here we see in the lower left, like they're kind of a greenish, yellowy color. Now, if we look over to the right, we see there at the ligule, right? We see all sorts of fun stuff happening. Like the grass seems pretty smooth as you look at the shadow, but then right there where the sheath emerges from the stem, there's a whole bunch of hair, and those hairs are white. And then the other thing we're seeing in this picture and also in the left picture is that you see there's a little bit of a color change there. It's kind of reddish right there at the node. And when this grass dries, these inflorescences like curl up like a little eyelash and grasses dry stratify, so you don't have to like rush to collect the seed. I was out just the other day and I found a whole patch of blue grandma that still had its seed, which was truly amazing. And when it doesn't have the seed, this rachis just kind of almost looks like a rib cage, right? There's just it's empty. There's no seeds in it, so it looks really much thinner. Um, but yeah, if you still have seed hanging on, you can collect it. All right, so with the blue grandma, the co-dominant species in the Colorado grasslands are blue grandma and buffalo grass. And at first glance, they look similar, but they're actually not very similar at all. And so here, the buffalo grass is usually like a lot lower. It has a lower stature. Also notice over on the left that we only really saw hair right at the um, node and the ligule for the blue grandma, but the buffalo grass is hairy. All the leaf is hairy. So that's a good indicator. This rachis for the buffalo grass is much shorter and lower growing, right? So tucked down into the grass. And there we can see that the anthers are more like a reddish color. And then over here, what on earth is this? This is a great example of what is called a dioecious plant. So there, and Catherine, you could write these words in the chat if you want, because they're hard to spell. So there's monoecious and dioecious. And monoecious just means like there's one house. There's the male parts and the female parts on the same flower, like the same individual body. But in the buffalo grass, we see that there are female parts and there are male parts and they're separate. So here in this picture, these are actually the female parts, and this is like a little bulblet. And here we just have the male gametes, the male reproductive parts right here. And then finally, you can see that just crazy hairiness, right? That so hairy. So many native grasses are hairy because hairs are an adaptation for drought tolerance. They help to like keep the moisture close to the plant body. All right. So I will cover some non-native grasses because they are out there, right? And so here we have smooth brome. And this if you want to like really get to know grasses, like find a non-native one, tear it apart, take a look. And so here we see the panicle, right? The open panicle, excuse me. And this grass, depending on moisture, can be pretty tall, like 3 or 4 feet tall or a bit shorter. And there it has yellow anthers. And then what we're seeing here at the collar, right, is that we have a rolling sheath, right? So it looks like these two sides are rolling together. And then right at the collar, we do have a color change, and it's kind of like a right angle there. So it splays out. And then this is the classic EE environmental education reference. If you look at the leaves, there's like this little M print on the leaf sheath. And so that's kind of fun to look for. But it's easiest to see in the fall. Lots of grasses are easier to identify in the fall because they change to different colors. And this one changes to like a weird grayish purple color. And these wide leaf sheaths kind of look a bit curly. And so if you were standing like at the dam of Rock Ledge Ranch looking back at the North Reservoir Valley, you could really see that. And you can even see where we revegetated trails that we closed with natives because they senesce in the fall to like a brighter yellow color. So the trail never went away if to a botanist's eye. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about needle and thread grass. So here we have that on thing we were talking about before, and all these curly appendages are these awns. And in the needle and thread grass, they are exceptionally long. And let's zoom in here. The other cool thing is in the key, it references that this part right here is geniculate, which is just a silly fancy word for twisted. So if you catch one of these, you'll see the seed is super sharp and then it's twisted right here and then the on goes along. And this twisting like helps to drive seeds into the ground. And also we can see in this picture that thing I was talking about where it's emerging from this sheath, but it's already developed, right? See here, you can just see the ons, but you can't actually see the whole inflorescence. Okay, and now here we have a really good picture of this ligule, right? And we looked at that with in the sand rice grass, and this actually looks pretty similar to the sand rice grass ligule in the grand scheme of things. It's membranous, right? And measuring the length of that is an ID character and also the tip of it. It can be like a smooth edge or a jaggedy edge, or it can like come to a certain number of points. And then here we see that geometry as well of the like sheath emerging from the central stem. And I'm not seeing any hairs there, right? So this wouldn't be a good example of a hairy one.
Hey Maggie, question on the needle and thread. This is Catherine. Is
Yeah.
that one like when you see it out when it's kind of early green time, not brown time? That one kind of looks like really silvery. When you see those little long silvery things floating around grasslands, is that true?
Yeah, it yeah, it is kind of shiny. You can see here it's not hairy. And it's a hard one because it seeds fast and it loses its seeds fast, right? And so
Okay.
when it has no seeds, it just literally looks like this papery nothing. And I recognize it as a papery nothing. Because every other grass would dry in a different way, you know? So likewise, in the beginning of the season, when the seeds are not out, it also looks kind of like a papery nothing. And yeah, I could see it being silvery. Um,
Okay. Yeah, got it. I'll
yeah.
have to get out there and collect some stuff in that moment and then show it to you.
Yeah. Well, all right. So this one is a funny one. I think for a long time I thought it was green needle grass, but it's not. I called someone from CNHP and I was like, Jessica, it's like green needle on crack. And she was like, that is Agnatherum robusta. That's why it's called robust. And this is taller than me. And it has this big heavy seed pod. There you see those sessile florets. Here you see this rolling sheath. But interestingly, take a look at the grass. Another thing to note is this is the first one we've seen where the leaves are actually like they are folded. And so when they open, they have like a crease in them. And this one is I just really abundant in the Garden of the Gods and in our environment, but it's like never in any commercial conversations. No one seems to know about it. No one IDs it on iNaturalist. But it's a great grass to have here in our region. Okay, so now this is truly my favorite grass. This is the little blue stem, and it just is so colorful. It has so many gorgeous colors. And the seeds here on the right are really hairy. You can see they have little awns, you know, but here we have so much hairiness, and in the morning light, that is just so gorgeous. And I don't know why it's called the blue stem because it really just always looks kind of red, which is another great feature because it has a lot of winter interest. And this is a grass that actually all the taller grasses, they like more moisture, right? Remember, we're just on the edge of the Great Plains. This is the driest part of the Great Plains. And as we march eastward, some of the taller grasses become the dominant species. So like in the Garden of the Gods at Lot 10 is a great example of seeing that happen because all the moisture kind of like runs into the basin there of that parking lot, and the switchgrass and the big blue stem in the middle of the parking lot are huge. And right there where the you go across the parking lot, you'll see tons of little blue stem. It's like a hedge along the road. And that showed me that like this plant is like into facultative moisture, right? Right next to the road, there's sheeting moisture. So it has actually more moisture than farther away. And so just a kind of cool thing. And this one has weird, sparse, long hairs as well, like we saw with the buffalo grass. And another great way to see this is, as I was talking before about the geometry of things, this grass emerges in this like fan pattern, right? So the blades are folded and they're coming out like a fan, and that is, if it's really early season, super easy to see. Look at here in this piece, it's like flat. And so you see it has like a smooth edge here, smooth edge on the other side, and everything else is folded inside of that structure. All right. Now we will go to sand drop seed. This is another grass with an open panicle, except it's so delicate. It really is a very fine thing. And if you were to run your hand along this open panicle, like the seeds that would come off would be dust-like. They're so tiny. And here I think this is one of the key characters of this grass. Like, notice how this, where the inflorescence emerges at that uh node there, we see a color change of white, but also this sheath is like just really short. It just abrupts, right? It's not as even long as the inflorescence itself. So that is one of the key characters of this one, I think. And then here we see at the node, right? We see that I like to call this one the Lorax. It's like the Lorax mustache. Because so that is so flamboyant, right? It's just huge long grasses way extending. We see that rolling sheath. We see the color change at the node as well. Um, I like to call this grass late in the season maiden in the prairie because the grass blades, like they are delicate and they kind of curl out, and it sort of looks like a person standing in a field with their hair waving in the background. So sand drop seed. All right. So this is squirrel tail. This is a non-native grass, and it also has those awns that we were talking about. And I think this is pesky for your livestock. And here we see that it's sessile, right? We have a spike here, and you can really see the awns in the shadow. And then over on the right, what we see is as it dries, like everything gets a geometry to it. So the awn like turns back down, and that is an interesting feature. There's also foxtail barley, which I should add to this because they're kind of a look-alike. All right, so here we have intermediate wheatgrass and Thinopyrum intermedium. This grass is uh the I don't know what to think about it. It's the tragedy of my life. Someone very near and dear to my heart gave me Kernza, and Kernza is this really revolutionary thing happening in Kansas. And it's intermediate wheatgrass that has been genetically engineered, but it represents the first perennial grain crop for our monoculture systems, right? So if we were not tilling the ground every year to produce our annual wheat, we would be doing a lot for climate resilience, right? Tilling the land releases the carbon from that agricultural environment. But if the grass was not tilled, it would really represent a great carbon sink. So anyway, I had this little plug of this, and I like had restored my backyard with some like annual rye and some clover at first. I like just really, we completely did a full tilling of our yard, and we used this cover crop and then tilled it again, and we used to garden right into the ground there. Anyway, I woke up one day when it had been really rainy season, and I realized this is all intermediate wheatgrass. Like it was all from that singular little plug. So guess what? My yard is vegetated, but unfortunately not with the grasses that I have. And sorry for my long story. Kernza is an awesome thing, but do I want it in my garden? No. I basically created a post-agricultural landscape in my Old North End garden by accident. So don't be like me, don't do that. But it just is amazing. It really grows no matter what, no water all of the time. All right, so how do you know you have intermediate wheatgrass? Here at the collar, right, what happens is unlike we saw a bunch that were fanning out in geometry, this one folds over. And there are two little appendages that meet in the middle, but they are at a different elevation, right? So they don't touch each other. That's the best way to ID this grass when it is not flowering. And I will also note there are many wheat grasses, right? And they all have these sessile florets. And how they're positioned on the rachis is like how you can ID them. So I'm going to do it with my hands, right? If you have crested wheatgrass, those florets are just coming out opposite from each other. If you have native slender wheatgrass, they're alternate and they're really oppressed and spread apart. And then this is called intermediate wheatgrass. It's kind of in between. They're still alternate, but they are more sticking out and not as oppressed. Now, there are many other wheatgrasses, but those are just some examples of how you can tell them apart. All right, so keep in mind there are lots of words that describe grasses, and I will give this to Catherine to share with you, but if you just look it up, right, you can find a lot of like a glossary just to keep on hand. There's also a glossary in the back of any dichotomous key. Another resource that I just really love is Minnesota Wildflowers, and they have the best pictures of grasses, and a lot of our grasses are common with grasses in Minnesota. So please appreciate that and enjoy that. So now I am ready to take your questions. I just wanted to show you this one little last slide here, just to give an indication of the relative heights of the grasses, right? So if you're looking for tall grasses, you want to get the sleepy grass, the switchgrass, the big blue stem, and needle and thread. And then in the mid heights, we have little blue stem, sand drop seed, sand rice grass, side oats grandma. And then we get a bit lower and we're into our turf forming blue grandma, buffalo grasses. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Maggie. Are you ready for questions at this point or?
sure.
Okay, great. And I know, Carla, I saw that you had your hand up. I don't know if you would like to um, kick us off or if your question was already answered.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I try to technologically challenged here. Okay, question is how is sleepy grass different from thick spike wheatgrass? It looked the same to me when I did at first glance.
Thick spike wheatgrass. I am not actually familiar with that grass. So I can't answer your question. I'm sorry. I can look it up.
Okay, well, I'll work on it myself. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Maggie, I think that my thought on that, maybe I'm wrong. So this is not coming from any sense of authority at all. But I think that the sleepy grass has like more like the awns sticking off. Because it kind of gives you that like a little bit of a fuzzy look, when the seed head is. I may regret saying this, but I think that's something to investigate of whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I will definitely look into that. And it could be that I do know thick spike wheatgrass, but I don't know of its name like that. So
Well, yeah, and obviously common, maybe it is the same thing and it's just a different common name. And then Catherine, a quick question for you. I have one of my Bible guides is an old Colorado State Cooperative Extension guide called Native Grasses, and it's got Bulletin 450A. Do you know if that's still available for people?
I am not sure.
It's a fabulous, it's got pencil drawings of all the different grasses and I don't know, it's in range terms and all the parts of the grasses, and it doesn't have as much detail, Maggie, as you were giving in terms of looking closely at the pedicels and the nodes and all of that. But it has some great overall pencil sketches of the way the grasses look, and if it's available, I highly recommend it to people. Bulletin 450A Native Grasses from CSU.
Very cool.
thank you.
Okay. Next one would be Jess Gray.
Hi, thanks for the talk. It was really helpful. I really like the shadow photos too. I hadn't ever thought of that. There are a couple of groups of grasses that I come across really frequently, and I always have a hard time telling them apart. The first group is intermediate wheatgrass, tall wheatgrass, and Russian wild rye. And the second one is squirrel tail and foxtail barley.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera off because my phone or my computer does not like it when I troll the internet. But I'm gonna give you a tour in iNaturalist and show you what I do. Because in iNat you will see that there are so many pictures that it's easy to create a decision-making process for your own mind. So let's see if I can get this. All right. So, oh, if I could spell. And Melly texted me something about this. I didn't see it. Okay, Melly is correcting me. So thank you, Melly. She said Hordeum jubatum is native according to Ackerfield. Squirreltail and foxtail barley are synonyms. Squirreltail is Elamis elamoides. So we'll look at that in a second. Okay, so I'm just showing you here the wealth of photos that you could gain in the same in one moment, right? For deciding for yourself if it was this or that. And then the intermediate wheatgrass, I am blanking on what it's called when like there is those little two hooks at the sheath. That's the key character for that guy.
I think Maggie, are those called oracles?
Oracles, yes, thank you. I was like trying this whole time to remember. Okay, so now let's look at squirrel tails. So just right off the top, I would say before we go there, right, that this foxtail barley, the Hordeum jubatum, is softer looking to me, right? And that is not a scientific term, but this feels softer. Um, and then let's go to squirrel tail. And as you do this, you can also restrict by season, right? So see here, it seems like the ons are just more robust. They are thicker. And I have not looked at this in the keys. So I'm guessing there might be something about the length of them. And anyone, please chime in.
Yeah, my experience is that I always tell the difference. Squirrel tail is stiffer, as you say, it's more upright. And then the foxtail barley definitely waves more in the breeze and has more of a curvature to the inflorescence. And also has a little bit of a sort of a reddish or purple tint very quickly once it comes out. So it's definitely has more of a curve to the inflorescence. I guess that's the way I would look at it.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to share this slideshow with you, right? So I'm going to go real quick through here, but going through Poaceae and Ackerfield isn't that difficult. And at first you get rid of all this weird stuff, and then you get into the keys of grasses. And I've found it to be really helpful to look at the key, and what you're seeing is just my notations of what's happening. But then now here, look, key 1 is all the spikelets in pairs, right? And then key 2 is spikelets all on one side of the rachis. So as you're exploring, it's like you can look them up and see, compare their key and find a character that really helps you. But I didn't do that for this one before the talk. But just an interesting thing to think about is how you can use the key as a learning tool. It doesn't have to be that you plop down in the middle of the meadow and you're keying out a grass you don't know, right? This northwestwildflowers.com website, to answer one of the previous person's questions, you can load up as many up to 4 species that you want to compare. And then it sets it up in the split screen. So this could be a really, really helpful reference. Thank you for sharing this.
Oh, that's so cool. I was not aware that that existed.
Yeah, me neither. And so we go, it says Northwest Wildflowers, so that's probably why we never found it, but it's same plant. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And Maggie, thank you so much. This was a great presentation. I think you did a wonderful job making this really accessible. And I know I learned a lot. So I just want to thank you again. And hopefully everybody will see you back on May 13th, and have a wonderful month.